Okay, we are live. I can't believe it. You can hear me okay, right?
I can hear you.
Yay! Oh my God, it worked. Technology, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Sheila. I'm super excited.
Well, Emily, it's
So,
great to be here.
so I am really excited about everybody who's on board. Looks like we have almost 20 people.
Hi,
And oh, there is a little bit of an echo.
okay, so when I put my earbuds in,
try it again
if I put
and
my
see.
earbuds in, then I might not be able to hear
Thanks,
you.
Kristen. Yeah, we had a little experiment earlier. And
How about now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Can everybody?
Okay.
Okay, good.
It's much better. Okay.
All right, good.
Keep talking to test.
La la
She
la
says.
la la.
No, oh my
La,
God,
la,
it's
la, la.
awesome. We are
Happy
awesome.
to be
Okay.
here, everybody. How's the echo?
Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much, Kristen. Okay, my name is Emily Clay. I'm with Illum Hire. I'm actually the co-founder, and we are building out a career empowerment platform for midlife professionals, really. And so that's going to be launching in Q1. We're super excited, and we're really, really excited to have Sheila Callaham here. And Sheila and I met at Age Equity Alliance, and I've been super impressed with her background and just the way she carries herself. So I wanted to give you a little bit, though, about her background. So she is not only the executive director and board chair of Age Equity Alliance, but she's also a contributor of Forbes on their diversity and inclusion channel, diversity, equity, and inclusion channel. So just a little bit about AEA, Age Equity Alliance. They're an organization partnering with companies, communities, and government agencies in order to build age equity in the workplace. Thank you so much, Eric, for posting that. And so that link that Eric just posted, you can find out a little bit more about the organization. So as I mentioned, she's a contributor to Forbes, writing for their DE&I channel. She's also served on the Conference Boards Council of U.S. Diversity and Inclusion Executives and the board of North Carolina Hispanic Chamber and Commerce. In her volunteer role with North Carolina Writers Network, she built one of the most active chapters statewide. She is an author herself, and she has published several cross-genre titles and contributed to a number of best-selling anthologies. You can check out Age Equity Alliance, which is right here in the chat. And Sheila also has 30 years of communications experience across private and public sectors in the US, Europe, and the Middle East. Sheila's expertise includes program branding, training, team building, conflict resolution, motivational coaching, and public speaking. She has her master's in international studies, and she has also earned several certificates in management, organizational development, and human resource management. So that is a pretty impressive bio. And I wanted to just reiterate the agenda today. So it's 3 communicating tips during a crisis. Oh my God, during a pandemic. What? Is stress at an all-time high? I'm asking for a friend. So what it takes to communicate effectively, as well as how to approach difficult conversations. And with that, Sheila, I'm going to ask you the first question. And people, please chime in with any questions that you may have. There's an ask a question button at the bottom. So just push on that, and then when you have questions, just let me know, okay? And then we'll go through them at the end. So the first one is, so why should a focus on communications be important when there's so many other things to be thinking about? And what about this topic is especially important for midlife career professionals?
So I think that anytime we're communicating, regardless of where you are in life, what stage of life you're in, or whether you're in crisis or whether you're in normal, whatever normal is, if there will ever be another normal, I don't know. I think that if you have good communication practices, consistent communication practices, then, it's always going to be a good thing. I think, if you think about times of crisis, when you're under stress, your body reacts differently. If you think about, the last time you had to have a conversation that you really didn't want to have, think about, how did you feel? Your muscles were all tensed up. Maybe your breathing shallowed, your blood pressure changes, and even the glucose levels in your body change, because we have this natural mammalian reaction. It's a fight or flight thing, and you're in this moment of, either you've received information that frightens you, and you have to respond, and your body's doing all this stuff, and your brain operates differently. And so the idea of, when you're under stress, there are so many things that can go wrong with communications. And so if you're at a mid-career point, you're going to be faced with some of the same challenges that you would if you were early career or late career. So to me, it's really all about establishing good communication tactics, and then practicing consistently, because what you don't want to happen is to be in a stressful environment, have the communications go wrong, because it takes so much energy and effort to try to recover, if you can recover at all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I, when you were talking about how your body reacts and changes, I was just thinking earlier today, like my voice changes and I'll have like a really tight smile. I mean, like the world knows it's like, oh my God, stay out of Emily's way. Not only is it game face, but it's like game face times 20. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice about that, about like, I know I'm self-aware, but like, how do you just go, okay, let's get the alto voice back instead of like,
Absolutely. And my stress reaction is I get agitated. If I'm under stress, I have a very short fuse. And so I think in both cases, what both of us should do when we feel that way is, this is what I do all the time. Just take a deep breath, because what happens is we stop breathing normally, and our heart's beating faster. We just have to take a nice deep grounding breath.
and not having and in a workforce situation, knowing that you don't have to respond right away. And it took me a long time to realize sometimes you just don't have to respond at all. You can just say, hey, can we talk a little bit about that later?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that can be powerful if you approach it right.
Yes, I think that that people don't realize that they can ask permission to come back to the table. And if you feel a strong emotional reaction, then that's definitely a time when, if you're going to take a deep breath, and if you think about, how do you want the conversation to end? How do you want to come out of it? And if you feel so overwhelmed by the stress that you can't get in your mind how you want it to come out, and you're having all these physical reactions, your heart palpitating, then it's definitely time to ask to come back at another time.
Yeah, agreed. No, I think that's good. So what are the three most important factors in successful communications?
Well, that was a hard one to think about, because there's so many different important factors, and I sent you a handout. Do they have access to the handout I sent?
Yeah, we were going to do it towards the end.
Oh,
but
okay,
yeah.
okay. So, but if
Give
I
away all
were
the
to like
clues.
think about the top three things,
Yeah.
so whether you're delivering a communication message in a stressful moment, or you're on the receiving end of a communication message, I think you want to think about the end game. Like I mentioned a minute ago, how do you want to, where do you want to be on the other end of the conversation? If you're delivering the message, it's really, really important, I believe, to do your homework ahead of time. Think about, okay, the best way to deliver the message, where you want to be at the end, and the most logical way to get from A to B. You want to think about the best day to deliver it. Monday, not, maybe not the best day. In the mornings are typically not the best
Yeah.
time. You want to give
Right.
people time to, settle in or whatever. So you want to think about even all these little things. You want to think about holidays. You want to check people's vacation schedules. You don't, so you want to think about all these different kind of things. So that would be one, to really just do your homework and then to focus on where you want to be at the end of the conversation. I think that it's really important in communications to focus on connection. And I think one of the best ways to connect with someone is just to ask powerful questions. And that could just be digging deeper into where the message is coming from, or if you're on the receiving end, or you could be asking questions about where the resistance might be coming from. If you notice that the person on the receiving end is not really buying into it, then you can dig deeper into that. So when you ask questions, you give the other person voice. And when you give them voice, they feel heard, they feel acknowledged, and that creates a sense of trust and connection. So I think that's really important, to communicate, to connect. And then I would say, and again, going back to resistance, understand where resistance comes from. And so if you're delivering an important message and you feel that it's not being received, then if you know where the root of resistance is coming from, then you can work around it. So for example, sometimes people resist because they don't really understand the purpose, or they don't understand where you're going, or there's some kind of informational disconnect, and it's kind of like a knowledge gap. And so you can ask questions like, well, what part of this do you not feel comfortable with, or what would make you feel better about this? And then you can kind of dig in, you can see where the knowledge gaps are, and then you can fill in the gaps. Another reason why people resist is, it's emotional resistance. And that's kind of a fear-based resistance. So they might get it intellectually, but they might not like it. And a lot of times you see this kind of response in like in change management initiatives. And anytime you're changing a process or changing from one software to another, these kinds of things, you're doing upgrades or, whatever. There's this kind of emotional system because people feel safe, they feel comfortable, and change is kind of frightening. And so you could ask questions like, well, what would make you feel better about this? And the whole idea is to emphasize the benefits and the value of what's on the other side, of the change, for example. So, and then the third reason why people resist, and this is a really hard one, is it's judgmental resistance. And that is, they don't trust you, they don't like you, and it doesn't matter if what you're saying is like something that parts the heavens and makes light shine down. They're not going to buy into it. And if you think about the political environment that we're in right now, people are not going to hear the other side regardless, because there's that judgmental divide, there's a lack of trust. And when that happens, and it happens in companies all the time.
Sure.
People might not like their manager, or they might not like the leadership, or might not have trust in them for whatever reason, right? And when things like that happen, the best thing you can do is you can of course ask questions. What would make you feel better about this, or how could I get you on? What would it take for me to get you on board? A lot of times that's when you need to call in your stakeholders. You don't always need to be the person sharing the message, but if you have stakeholders that have a better relationship with whatever group you're communicating to, then that's something you can rely on.
Interesting. I like that. Well, sounds like that was more than 3.
Oh,
that was
no,
good.
Maybe it was. Sorry.
No, it was good. And I think also, if you tend to talk fast like I do, and I can have a sharp tone, and I don't mean to. That can be a total miscommunication. So just in talking to you, and how calm you are, and just mellow and methodical and like thoughtful, articulate, but I think that matters. That really makes a difference, because how is someone going to be? How would someone come back at you and attack you if you are just so calm, right? And just so serene, and how you,
Well,
but how you, no, but how you, no, I wouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? I think there's something to that, and sort of, okay, I'm going to talk slower. I'm going to be mellow. I'm going to, I'm going to bring out the mellow Emily.
You know what? I have to tell you though, that's been a journey for me, and I've got a great example of this. So, the first 10 years of my career, I worked on and off for the Department of the Army. I was a civilian, and so I worked with military. In my last assignment, I worked in joint services, so I was working with Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And when I went into my first private sector job, I'm working for, at the time it was GlaxoSmithKline, a big pharmaceutical company. And I remember a director brought me into his office one time, and I was just a little, I don't even know if I was a manager. I don't even think I was a manager at that time. I was really, really young in the corporate world. And he brought me in and he said to me, he said, Sheila, you need to realize that you're not in the Army anymore. And that was a big eye opener for me. And so because you tend to adopt the kind of communication styles that you're around. And I was in the military, and people just they're not gonna
mess around.
Bush.
Yeah.
You just say what you need. I need this, and you go on. And so I really had to work on that. But I will tell you that I have never found any affront with your communication style whatsoever, because to me, it's very direct. I don't have to worry. You say what you mean what you say, and I like that. So I think it depends on what people are accustomed to,
Right.
And but depending on your audience, the fact that you're aware of it, how you sometimes might be perceived, then yeah, you know what? I think just smile. Just
smile and be sassy. Yeah, no. Okay, so I have a few other questions. Okay. And we have some questions from the panel, but I will address those at the end. So how can we get better at approaching difficult conversations?
Difficult conversations.
Contentious fabulousness.
Yes. So I think I worked for 15 years in pharma, and it was a global organization, over 100,000 employees. And I was very fortunate that I had access to a lot of training. And one of the best training modules I ever went through, it was a 2-day face-to-face training session on constructive contention. And I think the reason people have difficulties with those difficult conversations, why they dread them and just don't want to go into them, is because obviously they're uncomfortable. And people want to avoid that feeling of discomfort, whether you're on the giving end or whether you're on the receiving end. But I think that a lot of people haven't learned or haven't had the opportunity to experience that a constructive, contentious dialogue can actually yield great, innovative solutions. But you have to stay in the conversation. And
you can't run away.
You have to be able to share perspectives and come together with a desire for an agreeable mutual outcome.
I love that. Don't run away. So the next one is, in business, there's often someone responsible for crisis communications. How can we leverage what we do for personal crisis conversations as a midlife professional?
So how do you leverage What was the last part?
What they do for personal crisis conversations as a midlife professional.
Okay. So in
the crisis communications, yeah.
Yeah, so in crisis communications in a corporation, it's really all about managing reputation. But what's the key is quick response, authenticity, taking responsibility,
Yeah.
being a part of the solution. And so all of those things, all of those components are critical for anybody, midlife,
Yeah.
anywhere on the age spectrum, in terms of, having a difficult conversation or being in a crisis situation, a personal crisis situation, whether it's family or whether it's work, address it. Don't let it fester, because that doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
And be accountable, be responsible. There's always a shared burden of responsibility. And so acknowledging that, and then again, focus on the outcome. How do you want to be on the other end of the conversation, and how can both people contribute to that, to get to that outcome?
Yeah. I know you had a couple of corporate examples. Is this the area that you want to talk about that?
Oh, corporate examples for
the crisis communications and how, because I remember, I don't know when it was, 15 years ago or something, Odwalla juice. There was a child who was poisoned and died. And it was because they don't have a filtering program or something. I can't remember. They didn't filter the juice or something. Anyway, but they got on it, and there were public relations on it, and they recalled everything, and they started using other systems to filter. Anyways, they're still around, which is phenomenal, because they weren't like a huge company or anything.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there's some classic case studies for corporate comms done right and corporate comms done wrong. So for example, British Petroleum, when they had the explosion and the big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, I mean, that was a communications nightmare, because the CEO was, first of all, they were very slow. I mean, the leak had been going on for 4 days before the explosion, and nothing was communicated. The CEO, they didn't have an emergency plan around anything like this. They didn't have a crisis communications emergency plan. The CEO even said in an interview that they were winging it day by day. And then later he got, because there was an uproar. People were so angry. I mean, I think about 12 or at least a dozen people died. And people were angry, and the company wasn't taking responsibility. They weren't responding. And at one point the CEO was upset because he thought people were vilifying him. And the company,
so you got defensive. Not good.
It was a disaster. It was a real disaster. And I can remember, this was in the mid 2000s, and I can remember I worked for a British owned company, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm like tweeting like really hateful things about British Petroleum, and I'm thinking, oh well, am I going to get in trouble for that?
Yeah.
But
maybe.
but the point is that they didn't respond, and when they did, they were very defensive. So then another casebook study of corporate comms done right is much earlier in the 80s, when Johnson & Johnson, who owned Tylenol, there was some tampering, some bottle tampering. This was before there had the tamper-proof bottles. And so somebody had somehow put cyanide in Tylenol, and some Tylenol, and I think 7 people died from that. But Johnson & Johnson jumped right on it. They immediately sent out, bought all this advertising telling people, if you've bought Tylenol, throw it away, do not use it. They recalled $100 million worth of product. They stopped producing it completely, and then they spent time creating a tamper-proof bottle. And then when things had calmed down and things had passed, everything had been taken care of. One of the things they did is they worked with the FBI. I think they offered like $100,000 for anybody who had any idea about,
Oh.
did the tampering. So they were trying really hard to be involved in the solution. And then later, they created the tamper-proof bottle and began manufacturing again. So they did lose market share because they recalled all their products. So essentially a whole quarter of earnings was lost. But they regained all that because they immediately acted. They took responsibility. They tried to do whatever they could to solve the problem, and then they improved the product in the long run.
Yeah, they were trusted in the end.
Yeah.
So communications is more than just words we use. What other things do we need to be thinking about to ensure successful communications?
Well, obviously, our tone of voice, our
Mm-hmm.
body language.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say this earlier, but I think it's really, really important when you're delivering important communications that you try to do it directly with the individual and not through text or email or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
any other method. If you and it's especially these days in the life of COVID, getting on a video teleconference is the closest thing to sitting across the table that you can get.
Right.
And so when communications are really important, I would say that. So when you're in a video teleconference or in person, then you can see the body language, and body language tells you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And inflection of the voice, and yeah, it makes a big difference. So again, if you know that you're one that tenses up, just do a breathing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
A few deep breaths in.
Yeah. I read that body language is 80% of communicating, oftentimes.
Yeah, I
80%.
think it's really high.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I remember hearing or seeing data like that before, but I don't remember what it is. But I do know it's really high. I think
Mm-hmm.
words are important. I like to think words are important because, of course, I'm a word person.
Do you like words?
I do like words much more than numbers.
Me too. Yeah. No, I think that's good. So we discussed how we should communicate during challenging times. What are some things we should not do that we need to think about?
Well, don't communicate if you're feeling really emotional, and I think that's probably, I can remember being in meetings with a manager and just feeling like I was going to break down and lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the times when you need to ask for time, to reflect on the
Mm.
information that's been shared, and come back when you're not, feeling that emotional. And that's kind of hard to do when you're talking about your family or maybe your friends, and but it's important to
Yeah.
do then too, to even take time out if you come home from work and you're feeling really agitated, to instead of engaging, maybe put yourself in timeout or something like that. And since we're all, well, not all, but since a majority of people are working remotely, we're with our family 24/7. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to create space and give people time to step away. So that would be one thing, not to be emotional. I think,
But it's hard when you're in the moment and you're
yeah,
talking to a manager and, you know, maybe unemployment is super high now and
yeah,
you don't want to risk losing your job.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty bold to go, oh, you know what, could I put a pause on that and get back to you?
That's true. And the on the flip of that, you risk breaking down in tears. And I've
Mm-hmm.
done that before, and it's
Mm-hmm.
horrifying. It's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
horrifying. And it depends on the relationship you have with the manager or whomever
Mm-hmm.
you're speaking to, and how much you trust them to be empathetic and
Mm-hmm.
understand you and
Mm-hmm.
understand your needs. Um, and it's not so trivial as like, let me get back to you on that. It's almost like you could frame it like this. You could say, You've given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And this is true about me. I'm the kind of person that I really like to reflect. I like to percolate on information. I'm not really somebody who's off the cuff. And so it's very easy then for me to say, you've given me a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like
because I
that.
really like to take my time and be thoughtful and thorough in my response, I'd really like to ask you to give me a day or two to come back to you on this.
I love that. That sounds normal. I
You
mean, I
can do
think,
it too.
yeah, I think that would be really tough, especially if the other person is, emotionally charged,
Right.
then you're like, no. And if you come back calm
Hmm.
and monotone, then what choice do they have but to say, sure, right? When you
Hopefully.
de-escalate the
Yeah.
situation and you come back and you're just really mellow and you've done your, I don't know, yoga pose at your desk beforehand, then there's nowhere to go. But if you get defensive and if you get emotional, then they have the right, if you will, to be emotional back, right?
Right. But if you're in a situation, say, like if you're in a customer service kind of role and you're dealing with someone and
Oh
they get
God.
emotional, I mean, that's really hard because you can't say, hey, why don't you call me back when you're feeling
Yeah.
better?
Yeah,
You know,
right. No. Oh, wrong customer success team. Yeah,
right.
no.
Let me
That's not gonna.
transfer you. That's not going to work, right? And so that's different. I mean, you really have to stay in the moment. And in times like that, you really do need to breathe through. You need to try to remain as calm as you can, as positive as you
Mm-hmm.
can, and try to communicate to them. Your goal is to help them. You want them to feel better about the outcome. You want to feel good about the outcome, and that you're there to help ensure that whatever the end result is, that everybody's going to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's good. And it's like the team effort
Right.
and nothing personal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hard to do. Hard to do when you have
Takes
a bully for a
practice.
boss.
Takes practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But after you do it the first time and you see how well it goes, then it's easier to do it the next time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. So then the last question is, it's hard to judge how our conversation went. How can we really know if it was successful or not? I mean, I've heard these things or read these things about repeating what they've said to get clarity, things like that. But can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I do think repeating, agree. Okay, so what did we agree to? This is what I understand we agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your understanding? You could even go so far as to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to, to whatever we've agreed to, just to maybe try to
Mm-hmm.
determine if there are any resistance points there.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that. I think, the funny thing, Emily, is that I can remember being in meetings that I thought were a total disaster. I just can remember, leading meetings and getting off the phone and just thinking, oh my God, I really effed that
Mm-hmm.
up.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have somebody call me and tell me that was great. And I think that we are so judgmental of ourselves,
Mm.
so self critical, that what I like to tell myself when I catch myself thinking, oh my God, I really could have done so much better, what I say instead is, I trust that whatever I needed to communicate and whoever needed to hear whatever it was I communicated,
Mm-hmm.
that it went well and that they heard the information they needed. I just have to have trust in that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always ask for feedback. If you just go out and say, look, I just wanted to know, how did you feel about the meeting? What were your thoughts? How do you think I could do better? Those,
That's good.
feedback. Asking for feedback is great because again, that engages the other person in the conversation, and that's a message to them that you really care about what they think.
Do you think that could come across as condescending?
In what way? By asking for their feedback?
by saying, how do you think the meeting went? When it was obviously contentious about something.
Well, maybe instead of saying it that way, if it was contentious, you could always say, um, if I were in a meeting and it was contentious,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think twice to go back to my team and say, what do you think I might have done differently?
Oh,
That might have
I,
resulted in the meeting feeling differently for people.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think
That,
there's a lot of power in feedback.
I do too. I do too. And I think it takes a pretty confident manager to take it, to accept it. And behind closed doors, a lot of times they can say whatever they want because I'm not going to go to that person's boss, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's interesting. It just depends on the person. But if that person came back to the team and said, hey, I had kind of a big day yesterday and I blew up because sales were off or whatever, then I think that creates more empathy and more trust. And she's showing that she's willing to be vulnerable, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
that goes back to, being accountable, taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me check out some of we have 3 questions. Okay. The first question is, what balance should you apply between listening and speaking?
Oh, definitely you want to listen. You want to listen so much more. Now, I told you I was a words person and not a numbers person, but I would say, because when I'm having conversations in a dialogue with somebody, I do really want to ask a lot of questions. I really want to drill down,
Yeah.
and you want it to be balanced. It would depend on the nature of the communication, the nature of the dialogue, but what I would say is that when you do listen, you want to listen fully.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you listen, from the response you receive, that informs you for so many other questions you could ask to drill down. And so the more you have the other person talking, the more questions you're asking, the more you're understanding them, the more you're engaging them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to say, 70% this, 30% that, without knowing what the circumstance were. But definitely make room for dialogue. And so for that, I'll just say, let's try to make it 50-50.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think also one thing I would add is be cognizant of, and I'm so guilty of this, not redirecting it back to yourself,
That's
you
a good
know?
one.
So if you really want to develop rapport and a strong relationship with somebody, then really make it about them. And I mean, in sincere interest. And I mean,
Absolutely.
sometimes I'm amazed at some people who will remember something I said 2 weeks ago about something that wasn't work related,
Mhm.
say, oh, how was that, trip to New York or whatever, it's, I'm always impressed, like, oh, maybe I should ask them about their trip. But for me, I feel like I have to put it in my calendar, like ask, you know, ask personal questions, but because it shows that they were listening,
Right. I
you
think
know?
that's a good one.
So the next question is, how do you not speak over someone when you are engaged in conversation? When is the right time to engage, speak, your response or thoughts?
There are sometimes conversations that you have with people who you're waiting for them to pause so
Mm-hmm.
that you can,
Mm-hmm.
you know, participate in the conversation. And if that's the situation where someone just is talking and they're not giving you the opportunity to participate, then you just have to jump in.
You could pull a Kamala and say, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Well, that's one way to do it. You could always ask, um, when would be a good time, for me to contribute, or I have something I'd like to contribute. Is now a good
That's
time?
good.
Or, something like that. Or will there be a point in this monologue? Not really. Will there be a point in the conversation for dialogue, for other people to jump in? Yeah, I know it's really uncomfortable when you want to be a part of the conversation and that opportunity is not afforded to you, which is why it's so important for the person leading the communications to make space for dialogue, to pause, to ask questions, to call on people.
Yeah, the talking over is so rude. I mean, I know this person said that they do it, but it can be really, really frustrating when, especially if it's 3 people and you're both kind of trying to impress one person and someone talks over the other person consistently. It's just, you know what? Why are you doing that?
Yeah, when I've had people interrupt me, like I just interrupted you, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I say, I let them have their speak, and I'm like, as I was saying, and then I just go right back to where I was.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
A very subtle way of saying, you interrupted me, but I'm not going to let that bother me.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And then there's another question here, and it says, what are the best ways to make people feel comfortable and open in a Slack environment? I love that.
Wow.
Because, well, you and I both know we had one particular person who was combative, I will say. Right? And some people I felt, so bad because I didn't feel they could stand up for themselves. So do you try to be the mediator, or do you try to back off, or what would you recommend?
So this goes back to something that you kind of began our conversation with, and you don't always have to respond. Okay. And another thing is, we don't always have to be right. We may feel that, that we are right on one point, and the other person may feel that they're right on one point. But if we are big enough to say, I'm just going to let that person have their say, and step back and not have to be right, not have to have the last word, then that can be helpful. Again, it depends on the nature of the dialogue. I'm not as easily offended by contentious Slack conversations as maybe some people are, and so it doesn't. I'm not as sensitive to that. I know that other people are, and I try to help them feel better about it. But really, if you have to ask yourself, okay, what is is this worth my effort? Is this worth my energy and my time to debate on Slack with this person over whatever? And sometimes it's better to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, which is what I've done on many occasions when Slack communications were disappointing. I just, a video chat with them. Just, you can video them right there on Slack. So give them a call. Say, I don't understand. Help me understand what this is about.
Yeah, why you're so angry. So, yeah, phone calls I think are really good in a Zoom land and Slack land. So that has helped me a lot to go, oh, no, miscommunication. This is what I meant. Yeah. Interesting. So those are the questions that we have so far. Does anybody have any other questions? And in the meantime, I'm going to throw up Sheila's Twitter account. What do you have? Like 10,000 followers or something?
Yeah, something like that. I
Yeah.
got a lot of followers when I was writing and promoting my books, and yeah.
Good for you. I love that. And then the other one, we have a handout. So Eric, if you, oh, good. The communications handout. Yeah. Super. And that has the 9 communication tips by Sheila. So you guys can take that away. And thank you so much for the great conversation. I loved it. Do you have any other last words of wisdom?
Just believe in yourself. Focus on the outcome. Be really curious.
Yeah.
Be curious about other people, and I find that sometimes when I'm resistant to somebody else's idea, I flip it and I say that must be a clue that I need to hear this. I need to be open to this. I need to receive this
Oh,
because there's a learning for me in this. So when you feel resistance in yourself, I think that can be a great opportunity to learn. And if anybody had any specific kind of scenarios that they wanted to throw up, I'd be happy to talk them through that. But I think you guys have got this. It's just practice.
no, I think it's really good. I think that I've taken away some tips and wrote down some notes. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, wait, thank you. Yeah, everyone says thank you. Helen's on. You know
Oh,
Helen.
hi, Helen. Hi, everybody.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Sheila.
Bye, everybody.